Hi, friends, and welcome back to the Hangout. I'm Sid Wong, and I'm so excited to have yet another guest on the show tell their story and share how music has impacted them in their own way. I got the chance to talk to a new friend of mine, Mr. Jesse L. Martin, who a lot of you may know as Detective Joe West on the CW's The Flash, to playing Tom Collins on the original cast of Rent. After this episode, my thoughts were, wow, if you really want to pursue art, if you want to chase your dreams, if you want to just feel motivated to create, this episode will be super inspiring to you. Hearing Jesse's story of his musical background, to being on two very successful long-running TV shows, Law and Order and The Flash, you'll get to hear all sides to his story. I'm so excited to share this episode. It is a jam-packed one, but I hope you enjoy it. This is Jesse L. Martin on The Hangout. Today on the show, we've got someone you either know from his musical theater legacy and background, or you're going to be surprised by the side of him because you might only know him as a detective in various TV universes. I'm so excited to have him on the show. Let's welcome the amazing and talented Jesse L. Martin.
Hey, what's up, Sage people?
Thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out on the Hangout.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Let's kind of like brief people or bring them up to speed of like how we kind of met. It was kind of, if you want to tell the story. Yeah.
Well, I was doing this independent film called Reuniting, with a good friend of mine, Michelle Harrison, who's one of my co-stars on The Flash. She plays Nora Allen, Barry Allen's mom. And while we were doing the film, there was an on-set photographer. She was really cute. Her name was Sid. And I was amazed by her actual photography skills, because when you're on set as a set photographer, you almost have to be invisible. And she was really good at that. Like, I don't even remember you ever taking a picture unless you just sort of came up and said, hey, can I take a picture? But I'm sure I know you got some great shots. You showed me some of them. Anyway,
I'm excited.
That's how we met.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I feel like, I don't know, I want to say like, I feel like I sort of manifested working with you at some point, because I was just like, I feel like I grew up watching The Flash. I remember just coming home sometimes and watching it and being like, oh, what's the team going to be up to this week? And then I was like, Jesse L. Martin would be such a great guest to have on the Hangout because of his musical theater background. Just love talking about music. And then we bonded over our dogs.
Yeah. Is your dog there? My dog's literally sitting right here.
Look. Please, cameo. We need a cameo.
Baby! Oh my God. He's a little bit mad because I'm not paying attention to him, but he gets it.
Okay, cool. I guess let's dive into your background first. You mentioned that you were kind of based in New York growing up. What was that lifestyle like for you? What was your background?
I mean, it was, look, first of all, I am a total country boy. Like, I was born in a really small town called Rocky Mount, Virginia. Like real small. It's in like Southwest Virginia. And when I was probably about 6 or 7, we moved north because my mom and dad split up, and we moved north to Buffalo, New York, of all places. And I spent my formative years in Buffalo till I was about 17, and then 17 moved to New York City to go to theater school at New York University. And I lived in New York City ever since.
That's so cool. What was it? How did you kind of get introduced to the musical theater world? Was it just because you were in New York, or?
No, I mean, musical theater sort of happened long before then. When I started doing musicals in school, I'd always been in an arts program, a school that like focused on the arts since I was in maybe 5th or 6th grade. Cool. I went to an experimental school called the College Learning Laboratory, where they had an elementary school that was put right in the middle of a college campus. It was at Buffalo State University.
That's cool.
It was amazing. I mean, can you imagine all these little kids literally having access to the entire college? And it was hardcore intro into figuring out what you wanted to do as a career in the
Totally.
fifth grade. Then I really wanted to be either a sculptor or an architect. Of course, I'm neither of those things now. That's not even true. I still sculpt, and I just designed my own house. So that's kind of not even true. So it all came back.
You've
But
always
I've been
just been a
doing
creator.
musicals and whatnot in school well before I got to college. Actually, I did one musical in college. And here's another fun fact: I'm not necessarily a fan of musicals. I'm
What?
not. I'm definitely not.
Really?
Yeah, no,
That's so
I'm not.
interesting.
Well, mostly because of the way musicals have evolved, right? All
Right.
the musicals I've been in were for lack of a better way to put it, let's get real. It was all through a white lens, right?
Totally.
So if I was placed in a musical, or cast in a musical, I should say, like it was usually something where, here you are, the black kid, figuring out how you're supposed to be living in this magical musical world of white folk.
Right.
Because when it comes to black folks, we do music a whole lot different, a
Hmm.
whole lot different. And it wasn't until I got to New York City and got to see a lot more variety and diversity in musicals. And believe me, it's still through a white lens to this day.
Hmm.
Hopefully that will change, but it's part of the reason why I wasn't so I wasn't feeling musicals for a long time. Even
Interesting.
when I auditioned for Rent, I
Yeah.
I basically auditioned because I wanted to work with the director Michael Greif. I had sort of followed his career for a minute there, and I had this whole list of directors and producers that I really wanted to work with. Michael
Right.
Greif was one of them. And at the time, I had been auditioning a lot through this casting office, that was run by Bernie Telsey. It's now called the Telsey office. But Bernie Telsey was this guy who literally called me in for everything, even if I wasn't right for it. He would just
Hmm.
call me in. And at one point, he called and said, "Hey, there's this new musical that's being workshopped at the New York Theater Workshop," which was on my list of places I wanted to work. And he's like, I was like, "Well, what is it?" He's like, "Well, it's new and we're not sure what it's going to be. That's why we're doing a workshop." So I went in and auditioned, and there wasn't even a role for me at that point to
Hmm.
audition for. So I went in, I sang Amazing Grace, and then I left because I was doing a show in Connecticut at the time. So I got back on the train, went back to Connecticut. By the time I got to the theater that night, I'd gotten a call from Bernie saying that they'd offered me the role. And they said, "We're offering you the role of Tom Collins." I was like, "I don't even know what that is." And there was a guy who was doing the play with me in Connecticut named Byron Utley, and he had auditioned as well. And both of us were sitting there knowing full well that we had auditioned. I knew that I'd gotten cast. And so I was scared to ask Byron. I was like, "Hey, Byron, so you auditioned for that musical?" He was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Did you get it?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "What role did they offer you?" I'm like, "Tom Collins." And he was like, I was like, "What role did they offer you?" And he was like, "Yeah, they offered me a role in the ensemble." And I was like, "Are you going to do it?" He was like, "Yeah, I think so." And he's like, "Are you going to do it?" I'm like, I mean, I don't even know what it is. And I'm not that thrilled about it, but I don't have a job after this one. So yeah, I'm going to do it. And within a week of rehearsals for Rent, I was like, "I'm so glad I did this. So glad."
Oh,
Like
wow.
it was, I mean, first of all, the cast that they put together, some of them had never even been on stage before. Like Idina
Yeah.
Menzel had never been in a play. Adam Pascal had never been in a play before. There were some other ones who were getting well known in the like Daphne Rubin Vega, who's the original Mimi. She was on the charts actually with a group called Pajama Game.
Wow.
It was sort of like club music.
Yeah.
um and it was such an eclectic group of people, and so it didn't fit the mold of how I saw musical theater.
Right.
So I was already in it. I was thrilled about it, and you know how the whole show turned out. So it
Amazing. It's
was,
amazing.
yeah, it was absolutely one of the most transformative experiences I've ever had.
That's crazy. I just feel like it's just been such a movement throughout, honestly, like since the very beginning and even till today. And it's just impacted so many people. And even
Yeah.
with like, you guys had the live show and you guys went back.
Yeah,
with the Rent Live group in 2019, which honestly feels like yesterday still,
it
but it was
doesn't to
like,
me
I
for
guess,
some reason.
really, but
Not
yeah, it
really,
was
no.
2 years ago already, which is crazy. What was it
Yeah.
like, I guess, reuniting with all these people and just seeing like this new generation taking it on stage?
Well, the best part about it, and I think the reason all of us did it, is we don't get to see each other that often. We're not all in the
Right.
same place at the same time. So the fact that almost everybody from the original cast was coming, I think, save two people,
Mm-hmm.
was enough to get us all there. Now we're always asked to come and see, different productions
Right.
of Rent. So you're always a little nervous about it because you're
Skeptical.
like, oh
Yeah.
God, what if I hate it? And I'm not that great of a liar. Like I it doesn't, I can't do it. So, but we got there, and the cool thing about the Rent Live, they really took care to bring as many of the original production team
Oh
as
wow.
they could. So
Cool.
they had the director from the Broadway show, Michael Greif, and the choreographer, Marley Zierby, and a lot of people. So like there was a great amount of original flavor, if you will.
Yeah.
So that was cool to see. And of course, the whole thing, was marred by an accident where the lead character basically broke his ankle right before the actual live event was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So that was a little crazy, but the kids were so amazing and they were really spirited about the whole thing. And we were just glad to be there to basically be cheerleaders for them.
That's amazing. I guess take me back to when you guys opened on Broadway for the first time. Do you still remember that night or yeah, like that
Oh,
experience?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, by the time we'd gotten to Broadway, the show had, received a ridiculous amount of attention. I mean, because when we were down at the workshop, uh, you probably know the whole story, but for those who don't, our creator and composer Jonathan Larson suffered an aneurysm basically the night before our first performance. The whole show turned into a whole nother thing. I mean, what people don't remember is that this was a workshop that we were doing. It wasn't
Mhm.
done. The show was not finished. And of course, we lost Jonathan before it was, and we ended up doing the show as it was. It had already become a huge, huge thing before we even got to Broadway. So by the time we got to Broadway, there was a lot of attention. The zeitgeist had sort of like swirled itself into this one point. And that opening night, I'll never forget. All of us walking out on stage as the show began, and we got a standing ovation right at the beginning, just standing there, and that
Wow.
lasted for damn near 20 minutes. It was the most electric thing I'd ever experienced. I was so jacked up anyway because I was excited about it, and obviously nervous. But 20 minutes of that applause was it shook me. I was like so afraid that suddenly I wouldn't remember a single note or a single word once they finally stopped. Of course, we did, and the show was fantastic that night.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was probably the best stage experience I've ever had.
That's crazy. Because then you went from Broadway and then you also went to the West End. Was it
Yeah,
were was did you notice any differences with the crowds and the different
huge
places or
difference. Huge
yeah?
difference. Yeah, like the English theater audience is a lot more reserved. The theater community in England was a hard nut to crack for us. Uh,
Hmm.
One thing I could say about the Broadway community is that they are really a community. They really look out for each other. They really celebrate each other, and it didn't feel like that on the West End.
Oh,
It's we all felt sort of isolated in it. I felt that the show didn't have the same impact, and of course it couldn't because it's kind of a special moment for it to happen the way it did
right.
in the States. But doing the show on the West End was a whole different thing. I mean, I think maybe our producers were a little naive in thinking that the whole world already knew what Rent was, but the feeling we got when we got there was they didn't really know what it was. So there wasn't a whole lot of buzz around it in the beginning. and
That
it took a while for audiences to even warm up to it on the West End.
right. Did you ever like expect like your characters to be as like influential in culture today when you were
Oh
starting out?
no, God no!
Like,
Like no, we knew that it was special, and for the same reasons that I told you earlier that I was never that keen on musical theater.
right.
These characters were characters you just never saw
Yeah.
in any kind of musical, and the fact that Michael Greif and Jonathan Larson and everybody involved uh, allowed us to be all that we are. I mean, like literally left all the room in the world for culture and experience, which we never really got a chance to do in most theater productions,
Yeah.
where you got to really bring all of you. And that was the best part about it. And I'm spoiled because of it, because since then, I'm really not trying to do nothing that, they don't include not just me and my color, but my culture.
Totally. I like because when we were talking before about reuniting and then your character and having space
Mm-hmm.
to bring your culture to the character too, I thought that was really cool. Um, yeah,
It's important, and like it's everything to me now. And I mean, I'm sure you as an Asian, you run into so many situations where people ask you to divorce your culture just to be what, right? You're
yeah,
like,
yeah. I think it's difficult, but there's slow progression and just like being a little bit more pick and choose on like what I'm getting to be a part of and stuff.
I hear
And
that.
just making sure that like I'm recognized as who I am and not just like another person on the
Yeah,
sidelines, I guess. I don't know.
yeah.
There's a lot to dive into all of that.
Well, let's do that.
I feel like people are gonna hate me if I don't talk about the movie as well, where you guys as a cast, I want to say about five or was it five or four of the original Broadway cast of Rent came
Yeah,
into the
yeah.
feature as well.
It was one, two, three, four, five. There were six of us. Six of us
Wow.
from the original cast. Yeah.
And to bring like all of that original cast into the film is usually rare. Like we
Yeah,
rarely ever get
absolutely
to see
rare.
that. So I guess it was easier for you guys to dive into it in the future that time around, or like,
I don't know if it's true for everybody, but for me, it was absolutely true. First of all, I
yeah.
couldn't even believe 10 years later, my body was still doing this stuff. But there it was. I was doing it, right? It's amazing what muscle memory does. Like
Yeah.
it all just sort of came back. And it was like having all the time in the world to prepare for a film,
Yeah.
right? Like I got to do the show for damn near 3 years on stage. And then 10 years passed, and then suddenly here I am playing the same role in a film. Like all my research and work was done. All I
Yeah.
had to do was like make sure my body could do it, and lo and behold, my body did it. It was a great experience. And again, Chris Columbus is one of those people that allowed us the space to do us, to bring all we got to it. And I can't tell you how important that is. To this day, that's important, like because so many people do think, and I'm not trying to politicize anything. I just have to say what is true.
Oh, of
Like
course.
the idea of everything being through a white lens is just omnipresent to
Mm-hmm.
this day.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there are people out there who recognize that and realize that, hey, I have been working in a white lens and I don't necessarily know anything about this culture or that culture or how things are done that way. And but it doesn't mean I can't do it and sponsor these things, but
Right.
I have to leave space for them to do it.
Right.
And he certainly did in the film, and super grateful. I had a great time doing that movie. It was so much fun.
It's so good. I literally will play it on repeat for like eternity.
Oh,
Like
that's
it's so good.
fantastic.
It's so good. Just like Today for You, when you guys are in that loft, it's so
Oh
fun.
yeah.
Like what would you say was one of your favorite sequences to play, or like musical numbers to be a part of?
I have to say that my favorite song, um, the favorite song that I sang is Santa Fe. But my favorite music sequence in the show is, it basically starts with Goodbye Love, Halloween. It's in the play, it's called Halloween. I don't know, it doesn't really even exist in the movie. But it's the whole second act of the thing where people are dying and like people are breaking up and all kinds of things are going wrong, as you do in the second act of any play. But that's my jam when it comes to that show. But when I talk about things that I really love, it's usually little moments that like just kill me. Like Idina Menzel, who I think is absolutely brilliant. I don't even think Idina knows half the time how great an actual actor she is, because we all know that she's beyond phenomenal as a singer. Like she's like literally an icon now. But when we were doing the play, it used to shake me to the core sometimes how dialed in Idina can be as an actor. There's this funny moment where in the play, there's a point where in the same area that I'm talking about, the second act of the play, where Mark and Roger are having this back and forth, this argument. And there's a point where Roger says, "I'll call. I hate the fall." That's the line. And the entire time we were doing the show, Idina Menzel had no idea that he was saying, "I hate the fall. I hate the fall." She thought he was saying, "I hate the phone. I'll call. I hate the phone." So her like the world of Maureen in her head was just that, where she had her own world going the entire time. And like some of the reactions you'd get from Idina, they were always different, by the way, but like some of the reactions you would get Idina, particularly when we were on stage, were just like, wait a minute, where did that come from? And like, it's just because she was so relaxed in it. Like she didn't have a whole lot of trappings of like, this is how you act. And like, this is what we did in theater school. She didn't have any of that. She was just like, oh, I'm in it. She knew how to sing no matter what. Yeah. So like she was always able to do that. And the way she filled the spaces as a character, as an actor, or just how she felt it. And those kinds of moments in the show were the things that I remember distinctly, like to this day.
That's crazy. I feel like just musical theater as a whole is like a day camp, and everyone just goes, has a great time.
A real expensive day camp.
Yeah.
Real expensive. real expensive.
But I mean, it's somewhat worth it in the end.
Absolutely.
I could go on about it. But I feel like there's just so much more to talk about. You mentioned before too that you would want a Leo for a best score for a personal project that you did, which is called The Letter Carrier. It was a short film that you did in 2016. And that was also your director debut project.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind that project?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'd written all of these poems. And I don't even remember why I started writing these poems. I just did. But the Letter Carrier came because when I was a kid, my auntie Emily used to tell us these like spooky bedtime stories just to get us to go to sleep. Like a lot of times when we were little kids, we were all in the same house, which was usually my grandparents' house. And there was probably like 15 or 20 of us in the house at any given time. So you got kids running all over the place. And this was a tiny little house. And at night, my auntie Emily would tell us these spooky stories just to get us to go to bed. And she told this crazy story about the letter carrier. Now, where we lived in Virginia, we had a mailman who came from when I remember the earliest, he would come like on a horse and buggy, basically. And then he got a little truck. But our mailman at the time was a really good whistler. Like you could hear him whistling before you saw him. And so my auntie made up this story about how, the letter carrier comes and when you hear him whistling, you got to go to bed. She told us all these stories when we go to sleep, but like, you got to go to bed because he steals children in the night. And for whatever reason, I remember that and started writing these poems like based on that story and sort of expanded it. And I showed the poems to a friend of mine, Rick Cosnet, who was working with me on The Flash at the time, playing Eddie Thawne. And he was like, oh my God, these are fantastic. He's like, we should do something with them. And I was like, well, I think the only thing I could think of doing with these poems is turning them into songs. And Rick was like, well, that's amazing. You should do that. And we should film them. And I was like, in what capacity? And he's like, I don't know. Let's tell that story. And I don't even know why I said yes, because I didn't have any idea how to turn these, first of all, turn these poems into songs, and then turn these songs into a story. And then the idea of there becoming a story that we film, but we both had decided that we both wanted an experience directing a film. Mm-hmm. So we decided we'd co-direct it and see what happens. Long story short, we started a Kickstarter campaign to raise money to do this little short. And we got ridiculous amounts of support from everybody, not to mention the crew from The Flash all jumped on board and were like, no, we totally help you. Like, we'll bring equipment. We had, C. Kim Miles was our DP, who's like total pro DP. And we cast it in Vancouver and, shot it over a course of 6 days in Maple Ridge. And, totally had a great time, loved it. And then obviously a year later, I find out that not only had I been nominated for a Leo for best score for a short drama. I can't remember what it's called. I'd have to look at it. But I'd been nominated, but not only that, I'd won one. And I didn't even know what a Leo was at the time. Like, I was at my house having a birthday party for a friend of mine, and another friend of mine, Kari, called me. She's a makeup artist. She just won a Leo, and she was there at the award ceremony. She's like, hey, they just announced that you are up for a Leo. If you win, do you want me to go get it? I was like, what's a Leo? And yeah, go get it. So she brought it to the party afterwards, and I was thrilled.
That's so fun. Yeah. I was watching it and I was like, is this a horror film? And it was like a musical, it was drama. Yeah. I was like, this is everything in between. And I was just like, this is so good. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. And then of course, one of the things that I definitely wanted to explore was I started thinking about fairy tales and fables that we all know of. Again, you hear me talk like this all the time. Please excuse me if it's tiring to your audience. But again, all these fairy tales and all these stories like Little Red Riding Hood and all these things, they were all basically told through a white lens. And if you listen to the stories, they're really, really dark. Like, these are not kids' stories. Yeah. So I was like, well, if it were a black fable, if it were a black story that way, what would it be? And, if it were in any kind of historical context, where would it be? And, obviously one of the bigger tragedies, in the history of Black people on this planet is the advent of slavery. Right. And so I said, well, let's go dark. If we're going to go dark with a fairy tale, let's go there. And so that's where this story is set. It's about a family that escapes slavery, and they use the mother uses the story of the letter carrier to keep the kids home, to keep them from veering away from where they are, so that they don't get caught by actual slave catchers and taken back into slavery. So dark fare for a fairy tale, if you will, but exactly the same trajectory as most fairy tales we know have gone. Of course. Oh, so good. It's so good. I love it. Thank you. Yeah. I guess like overall, rapping with Rent, rapping with the letter carrier and the music that you've composed, how has, like, for the Hangout, we always try to figure out how music has impacted people in different ways. How do you think music has kind of changed your life or impacted you? Because I guess we did talk about it once, but we were like, music has changed my life personally, and that's why I started this podcast. How has it changed your life? Well, first of all, it's always been a presence. As a kid, like I was saying earlier, being in my grandparents' house down in Virginia, every weekend was full of at least three things for sure. There was always music, there was always moonshine, and there was always food. And those things were constant in our lives. And my grandfather was a huge
sort of folk blues player, not in any formal sense at all. It was just, that's what he did. He was, when he was feeling loose and having a good time, he'd pull out his harmonica, dip it in a glass of water. I'm not really sure what that's about, but he would do that and, knock it off on his leg and then just start playing. And before you know it, my uncle would join in with a song, or somebody would show up with another instrument and start playing. And we grew up hearing that kind of music. And it's definitely what influenced the sound of what happens in the letter carrier. I mean, that's literally us to a T. Like that kind of music, that kind of sound is us to a T. And it's still me to this day. Like it's the kind of music I gravitate towards. There's a storytelling to it. There's an absolute saturation of our culture in it. So it is my jam. And it has informed me for my entire life and career. Like I'm always trying to get back to music, even when I'm on stage doing, straight play, like a drama or what have you, where there isn't necessarily any music or anything. I'm always thinking music. I use music to prepare. I use music to create a role. Like if I'm playing a role that is not even in a musical, I say, well, what kind of music does this guy like? What kind of music, is playing in his head? You know how we all have a jukebox in our head all day long. Right. I'm sure you do. And I oftentimes think as a way to get into a character, what's the jukebox? Like what's on their jukebox? What's playing constantly? And it totally puts me in a great space that isn't necessarily Jesse, but of course born of Jesse, but like it puts me in a great space to play a character that isn't necessarily me.
Right. Like, do you ever create like playlists? Like on like Spotify and like, oh, okay, this person's gonna play this is a song.
Absolutely. Yeah. I let it inform everything. I even in the beginning of my career, I used music to literally memorize lines.
Oh wow!
Like if I were able to, attach, the text to sound and music, it was way easier to remember. Now I don't even know how to remember stuff. I just do. But back then I had to really work at it. And music helped me with everything that way.
That's crazy. Has it changed your life personally? Like, has it gotten you through tough times? Like, do you use it as that sort of a mode of form?
Absolutely. Right? And of course, that's true for everyone, I'm sure. And music is the food of life. Like I feel like we take it for granted, right? Like if we didn't have music, what would be the jukebox of life? Like, I guess nature would answer that question, but even nature has a rhythm. Even nature has music.
True.
So
true.
It's literally everything. It is the beat by which we live, the rhythm by which we live. I truly believe that.
I love that. Yeah. I guess. Okay, when you were you doing theater before or film first, or was it like simultaneously?
I was always theater before.
Okay, cool.
I started with theater. I'd spent getting out of college. My first job out of college was with a theater company called the Acting Company, which was started at Juilliard a long, long time ago. And it was supposed to be a springboard for the students to go into the professional world. So they would basically do a tour of usually classic pieces like Shakespeare, oftentimes like Chekhov and things like that. The first group coming out of Juilliard was called Group One. And some of the actors that were in that company that toured were, them, like it was Kevin Kline, Patti LuPone, David Ogden Stiers. Like there were a lot of well-known people coming out of Juilliard to do this company. So many, many years later, here I am. I didn't go to Juilliard. I went to NYU, but I got a chance to audition because one of the actors in the tour had hurt himself and wasn't able to continue. So I auditioned and lo and behold, got in. I was definitely the youngest member of the acting company ever. And I toured the country doing Shakespeare. We were doing Romeo and Juliet and Two Gentlemen of Verona. And you want to talk about music, in Two Gentlemen of Verona, the concept was that there was a troupe of clowns from the circus who decided they wanted to be taken seriously. So they started doing Shakespeare. Now, of course, imagine clowns deciding to be serious and doing Shakespeare. The entire thing was all music driven, and one of the best experiences I ever had that way, where the clowns, when they weren't on stage doing this lofty text that Shakespeare is, they were in the orchestra. So we had an orchestra, and it was a ridiculous ragtag orchestra where, all these crazy instruments like a melodica, or, and all these percussion instruments just to emphasize sounds and things like that. So
cool.
it was one of the coolest experiences I ever had. And believe it or not, even in that company, we have some names that one of our cast members in that tour is Rainn Wilson, who is Dwight from The Office.
What?
Yeah, Rainn Wilson was in my company.
That's
It wasn't mine,
crazy.
but you know what I mean? Yeah, and he was fantastic.
That's amazing. I feel like there's a lot of people in like the TV world or film world that you didn't even know did like theater or like.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, most of the people I came up with I came up in New York City, so like New
Right.
York City is theater focused as far as actors go.
Right.
So spending the amount of time that I have in New York City, I got to know everybody, and it's always a different show when the theater kids show up. Always. I'm not going to say better because I don't want to be biased, but
very true. Well, yeah, I was telling you, I was doing the Disney Plus, like High School Musical, the musical, the series group and everything. So I was talking to all these different theater kids and I was like, this is just like a whole new world. Everyone is just so welcoming and just theatrical. And they just I feel like they have so much more fun because they have like that theatrical, dramatic background. And they just dive into everything full heart.
I think that. I definitely think that. I believe that.
Yeah. So I guess I was gonna lead up and talk about the transition from being in theater to going on screen and doing that sort of on camera work. What was that like for you?
It was pretty cool. I mean, I lucked out because obviously when the world noticed that I was an actor, it was on stage when doing Rent, of course. And Rent had such an audience that it led to some really great film opportunities. But initially it was television, where I had gotten a call while I was doing Rent. I'd probably been doing Rent for close to maybe a year at that point. Anyway, I'd gotten a call from, first off, it was David E. Kelly, who was doing a show at the time called Ally McBeal. Mm-hmm. And I was asked if I would be interested in playing the lead character, Ally McBeal's boyfriend. And the actor playing Ally McBeal was an actress called Callista Flockhart. And I'd known Callista, actually, the show that I told you about that I was doing in Connecticut right before I did Rent. Callista Flockhart was there doing Romeo and Juliet, playing Juliet. So wow. I'd known Callista through that, and being part of the theater world in New York City, and so I was super thrilled to be able to go and play her boyfriend in this television show, and that led to many more opportunities in television. I got a call from David Duchovny out of nowhere, who asked me if I'd want to play a baseball loving alien on the X-Files, and I was like, well, hell yeah, no, and that was probably one of the best television experiences I've had up until then. And that led to me getting the role on Law and Order, going all the way back to New York City, and working with some of the best actors I've ever worked with. S.E. Payton Murkison, Jerry Orbach, Sam Waterston, Dennis Farina. I really thought, like, wow, I've really done a damn thing now. Like when I was standing there, working with those guys on Law and Order, and the best part about Law and Order is the guest stars that come in, they're all theater people. They're all theater trained. So they come in and they guns blazing, right? Like they're so good at what they do that the show was just like this constant inspiring and thrilling experience on a regular basis, just to work with some of the best people in the business. So knock on wood, I hope to continue having those sorts of experiences, even if I have to create them now.
That's crazy. Did you ever expect it to run as long as it did?
No, I mean, well, I mean, I had a clue. Law and Order was already running for 10 years when I joined.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was already on television for 10 years.
Oh my
So
God.
the fact that I got to do 10 years
Yeah.
after that that's unheard of. Like most
Yeah.
actors don't get that kind of opportunity.
And then going on to The Flash too, that has been going when you guys are on like you guys just wrapped season 7.
Yeah, season 7, 7 years.
Holy cow. What's it like?
I
I
know.
don't know. Like moving from one like successful project to the next, which literally is long running for as long as it has been.
I mean, obviously, the only answer I have to that is gratitude. I mean, sure, I worked hard to get here, but
Of course.
there's a whole lot of gratitude involved in that. I'm just super grateful that all the work I've done, all the experiences I've had, and all the goodwill I put out there has come back to me that way. And I couldn't be more grateful.
Did you take any like things from Detective Ed Green and bring it to Joe West?
Not specifically, but I can say that working on Law and Order gave me a distinct idea of what the procedure is for working in law enforcement. So the rules, if you will, I knew very well coming into Joe West. Of course, Joe West's trajectory wasn't necessarily to show his police work. It was more for him to be a family man, a dad.
Yes.
And it's one of the reasons I actually took the role on The Flash, because when I was approached by Greg Berlanti about playing the part, I'd said long before then, I don't really want to play a detective anymore. And I knew that suddenly I was even a trope, like I was the detective trope at this point, the black guy, who's a cop. And I just didn't really want to do that again. I was like, there's so many more facets to explore.
Totally.
But along comes Greg Berlanti and he says, hey, would you play the detective on the show? And there was something about the idea that in the comics, Joe West he wasn't a thing. Like he didn't exist in the comics, but they wanted to change the story of the Flash in this way. There was something about playing, being a black person, black character in this world that I didn't necessarily see a lot of representation that way. So the fact that we were going to do that on television, that was intriguing to me. But the other thing I said to Greg was, listen, if you can promise me that this character will be more about him as a father and a family man than it is about his police work, then you got me. I'll come and do it. And he promised me, and he stuck to his word.
That's amazing. There was the musical episode I think you guys did it season 3 or 4?
I can't remember.
I don't remember, but how was that approached to all you guys? Because Grant has like a musical theater background.
Yeah.
Carlos has the musical background. The other Arrowverse people came into, and
oh my God! Like, first of all, like you couldn't have picked a better group to do a musical because everybody is so tuned in that way. I mean, like you mentioned, Carlos, Grant, in the Arrowverse, you got Jeremy Jordan, you got Victor Garber, who is somebody I've known like a big part of my life. I've known Victor well over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And the fact that, we played these, married gay mobsters, like who gets to do that? That's pretty amazing. Just to sing with Victor was just all I ever needed.
Because I guess you guys are always in like the superhero universe, and then you guys took a step back and were like, okay, we're gonna put on a musical episode. Yeah. It's so different to kind of like, it probably was like one of the more fun weeks, maybe.
It definitely was. Look, it was a lot of work because filming a musical and doing one on stage is a whole different, ball game. Totally. So it took a lot to get it done. But now that I've done it at least once for television, I have some distinct ideas about how to do it where it's not as taxing. So hopefully I'll get a chance to do those things.
Are you going to be writing your own musical, and or are you working on your own musical?
I'm working on my own film world, let's say that, and music is definitely a part of it.
Oh my gosh, please invite me when you start doing it.
Absolutely, Sid.
Please. Please.
Absolutely. You be there. I promise you.
um what are some of like what are some of your dreams and goals moving forward? Because I feel like you've done so much already in your career. Like, is there anything still you want to tackle?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it is not necessarily in the world of acting. It's
Right.
more in the world of creating, directing, producing. One of the big trajectories right now is growing up. I had, they always say the expression "it takes a village," right? Growing up, I did have a village looking out for me. I had a lot of people who were keen on introducing me to everything that had to do with the creative world. And I want to do the same thing for a lot of young artists, and in particular, artists of color who I think should have a safe space to create. We were talking earlier about how you fit in a world that's always been, sort of portrayed through a white lens, right? So I want young people to be able to come at least somewhere where they get to be everything they actually are in a creative vein. So I'm doing my damnedest to create a space like that now, and stories that celebrate that.
That's amazing. I love it. You're such an inspiration for so many people. I know it. And like
You're
it
nice, Sid.
you're just amazing. I also just want to talk about the last episode that aired for The Flash, which was the Goodbye Vibrations episode. Um,
Yeah.
oh, what was it like? I guess saying goodbye to Carlos's character, Cisco, that has been
Well, I mean,
yeah.
look, to me, I'm bummed a little bit, because not even a little bit, I'm bummed, period. Because first of all, I think what Carlos did with Cisco was phenomenal. I mean, that kid came out blazing, and he'd never been on television before. Again, a theater kid. Carlos's first job was a Broadway gig. He
Was
was
it
in
once?
once, yeah,
Yeah.
on Broadway. Like, that was his first job out of school. Actually, I don't know if it was her first job, but like, I think it was maybe his second. The first one was like a
That's
tour of
crazy.
Jersey Boys. You know, exactly.
What?
These are theater kids, right? So, Carlos was certainly nervous coming in. He'd never done television before. He was also well aware of the eyes on him creating this character, Cisco. And man, did he do it. Like, Cisco had an immediate voice. Immediate. And it was so funny to me. Like, I thought he was fucking hysterical. Like, there were times when, the writers would write a joke for Carlos, and in my mind, I always said, they shouldn't even write the jokes anymore. They should just say, "and Cisco says," and just let Carlos fill the blank, because he was that tuned in.
Yeah.
And so, it makes sense to me that Carlos got to the point where he had to see his way out of the show, because I don't think I've met many people as hyper talented as Los. You should know that the Leo Award that we were talking about earlier, I'm not the only name on that award.
Right.
Carlos Valdez is the other, because Carlos helped me put together the soundtrack for the film.
Yeah.
And just a note on how humble this kid is. When I told him, I was like, "Hey, we won a Leo." He was like, "That's awesome." I was like, "Well, you should I get you a statue as well? Because I think you have to order, another statue if it's more than one person on the name." Oh, damn it! I
Gotcha.
just spilled coffee everywhere. I did,
No.
but it's okay. And Carlos didn't want it. He was
Aw.
like, he didn't. He was like, "Well, no, that's yours. I mean, you did that." And I was like, "But you helped me." He's like, "Yeah, but that's your music. You wrote it. I just sort of work with what you had." Uh, just super, super humble, this guy. But you cannot believe the talent pouring out of this kid. So the idea that he's leaving uh, means that Carlos is free to do what Carlos really can do. I mean,
Yeah.
when you think about somebody like a Lin-Manuel Miranda, right? And like the world that he's gotten to create, Carlos is that dude. He is
Wow.
definitely that dude. The
Yeah.
worlds that Carlos can inhabit are vast. And I can't wait to see what he does. I cannot wait to see what he does. And if I can use any kind of, power that I have, or spaces that I create to help Carlos, be that dude, I'm going to do so. So the idea of not being able to work with Cisco is a bummer, but the idea of being able to work with Carlos is fantastic.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Also, just like you guys had that inside joke of whenever anyone goes into a coma, you play Lady Gaga. You had the karaoke scene. I was waiting for you to start like dancing and singing Poker Face. I was like, okay, is Jesse gonna start singing? Are we gonna see it?
I mean, Jesse would have done it, but Joe West ain't gonna do that.
Earth 2 Joe West would have, but
Earth 2 Joe
he's
West
gone.
would have
He's
jumped
gone.
right on in. But not regular Earth Joe. No, not at all.
Okay, for our dog loving friends, if you want to, you told me the story of how you got Romeo. If you want to tell other people, because dog lovers here, go for it.
I mean, I think it's a funny story. Anyway,
it's so adorable.
So obviously I suddenly out of nowhere really wanted a dog. And I was just sort of putting the word out there. Hey, if anybody knows of any rescue situations, I'd really, really like a puppy. And so one of my friends, Kate, she kept sending me links to oh, here's a puppy, or here's a place where you can get a rescue. And then out of nowhere, I got this link to a couple in Langley, an older couple whose dogs had a litter. And they were planning to take the litter to a rescue situation, but it sort of put out the word to friends and family, if anybody's interested in adopting a pet, come see us. So with that little link was a picture of a little, it was an Australian Shepherd, Border Collie, Poodle, Lab situation. But it was an adorable little black and white puppy. And it was a girl, and her name was Hook, because she had sort of like a little white hook on her neck, like kind of like a Maori hook. And I was like, oh, she's so cute. I want to go see. So a couple of friends of mine, we got in the car and we were driving out to Langley, and we were talking about, I had done this this weekend performance like of Romeo and Juliet that was done as a benefit for the public theater in New York City. And they'd gotten this incredible cast together to do Romeo and Juliet for a whole weekend in Central Park in New York. And, we had Meryl Streep playing Juliet, Kevin Kline, who's in that original Juilliard group, Ben Kingsley, Jeffrey Wright, and Christopher Walken was playing Mercutio. And while we were rehearsing the play, Chris Walken kept referring to Romeo as Romeo. And there was a point right before we started the performances where our director was giving notes to everybody, and he said to Chris Walken, he said, Chris, I believe that the usual Western pronunciation is Romeo. And Chris Walken looked this man dead in the eye, and he goes, that's what I said. Now, nobody questioned it after that. And so from then on, it was Romeo. So I was telling the story on the way to the farm. And when we got there, that little girl, Hook, that I met her, and she was adorable. All the puppies were adorable. But she had no interest in me whatsoever. She came over, she said hello, and then she just ran off with the rest of the puppies. The only one that was still there was apparently the runt of the litter, and he was the only one that was a merle, which refers to the color and pattern of his coat. And this little one just came over, and he sat down on my foot. And I was like, oh, that's adorable. I pick him up, and I put him in my lap, and I look down at him, and he gives me a little peck on the cheek. I was like, this dog is adorable. And he just laid down on my lap and went to sleep. So I looked at my friends and I'm like, Romeo. That was it. So that's my boy now, Romeo.
That is the best story ever.
I know, right? I hope at some point in my life I get to run into Christopher Walken again, so I can tell him that the reason my dog is named Romeo is because of him.
Please, that needs to be captured.
He probably won't even remember he worked with me. Shame.
Oh man, that's.
I mean, it was just a weekend, so.
I mean, if you bring up the story, give him a lot of context.
Yeah, he might remember that. Well, he'll certainly remember that he called Romeo Romeo. I'm sure he'll remember that.
It'll trigger something, and then it'll all come flooding back.
I think so.
Okay, I feel like we touched upon pretty much everything, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to add or just say to listeners or about yourself or just in general? Plug in anything too.
Well, I mean, I can't really think of any like magical moment to talk about, but what I can say is I'm assuming that a big part of your audience is BC based, like in the Vancouver area. And I'm assuming also that a lot of your audience are artists in their own right. And what I'd love to say and love to encourage is that there is not necessarily, or at least I don't feel it, and a lot of people I know who come here don't feel it, there isn't necessarily a meshing of the different genres of creativity here in Vancouver. And I'm hoping beyond hope that I can be part of it, but that the creative world, like the musicians and the actors and the artists and the dancers, all find a way to come together, because it's I think it's the benchmark of a great city when all the cultures are able to come together under the umbrella of the arts. I mean, it feels like in BC and Vancouver particularly, things are quite separate and everybody goes in their own little spaces and these things don't ever come together. And I'm hoping beyond hope, and it's great that you're doing something like this, Sid, because what it does is it at least says to everybody, hey, first of all, let's celebrate the fact that we are creatives and we are in the arts, but let's all get together. Let's all start working together. Look, you guys are getting inundated by, what is being called the great northern migration of, the film industry, right? Hollywood North is really a thing now, right? Mm-hmm. And you're getting this influx of talent and also attention, an audience, if you will. You guys really have to take advantage of that. Like, show everybody, particularly all these people who are coming up from mostly like LA and the US, that Vancouver's got a handle on this arts thing. And you do. It's definitely true that you do. But it has to come together so like we can all share in it. That's something that I really wanted to just talk about, because I feel like I've met so many artists in Vancouver who are literally desperate to work with others. Like, you need that kind of support, because it's literally hard to make a living as an artist in Vancouver. Things are so expensive, right? Like, right. If there is a space and time where everybody gets to come together so they not only support each other in the arts, but, in just general living. And that's what makes a city great. I'm not trying to say that Vancouver isn't great. Obviously it is. But what it could do in the art world is phenomenal.
Yeah. Wow. Jesse just dropped the mic. The podcast is over. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is so true. There's just so many artists that, oh my gosh, there's just so much creativity.
There's a lot of artists there who are literally just searching for a forum, like you just created here, searching for somebody just to, reflect, how they think and how they feel and the things they want to do. And, and inspiration goes a long way, gang. Like, if you're sitting in your room and you're the only person that gets to see the work that you do, that's not helping anybody, and it's not helping you either. You need to be reflected that way, right? And be amongst your kind. Find your tribe, all that good stuff. Run away with the circus, all of that. And in Vancouver is so ripe for that experience that, I'm just encouraging all of you guys to just do the damn thing. There's no reason why you can't do exactly what the kids in New York City do.
I don't know how to end this off any better, ladies and gentlemen, and however else you may identify, Jesse L. Martin.
Woo! Thank you so much, Sid. This is really fun.
Oh my God, you are so much fun to talk to. Oh my God. Just like so true. Like, art in general, that's why I just love this podcast so much, because I could just go off about whatever it is that you're passionate about.
Cool that you did
music.
It.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's so cool that you did it.
I
Like
appreciate
that's
that so much.
fucking phenomenal, excuse my language, but it is like, and look, you could have just sat there in your room by yourself going, damn it, I wish I had musician friends to talk to about stuff. But here you are, finding people from all over the world, all walks of life. Here I am sitting in your room at the Hangout. Woohoo!
Thanks for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Leave us a comment and review on our YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're tuning in from. Make sure to like and subscribe as well so you know when new episodes come out. I would also really appreciate it. You can follow us along on all of our socials at the Hangout CA. That's it for now. We'll see you next week.